Welcome to the FF Forge. My name's Steve, and today we are going to be starting off the rankings haul with the wide receivers. This is meant to be a relatively quick video. I always do my best to be quick, and I'm not very good at it, but we'll do our best to stick to the task here, and I will be ranking, giving my preliminary rankings for the wide receiver position. All that means is I still have projections to do. I actually did get through entering all the data for the wide receiver projections, so my projections had a little bit of influence. Just went over them again this morning and moved a few guys. Really just went with guys who either stood out in the projections or looking at guys who I was struggling with where I wanted to move them, maybe wanting to move them back even further or forward further, and just seeing what my projections said about that and if they would agree with my opinion on moving some guys a little bit further or less. So I have two highlights here. The green meaning I am above the ECR, and the peachish color here meaning I'm below the ECR. Those are the guys that we'll mostly talk about. So let's just start off with the top 12 wide receivers for week 6 of the fantasy football season. I have Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Marquise Brown, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Courtland Sutton, and DK Metcalf. Starting off with Jamar Chase, I just want to throw some caution into the wind. My projections really did not like him this week, and my thermometer, if you're familiar with that on the projections, also didn't really like his chances of maybe surpassing what he's done so far this season this week, just based on some of his productivity to this point in the season and other matchup factors, including this number. So there were other factors that were not in his favor because red is like hot and blue is like cold. So there is not a lineup that I can imagine where you're going to be able to and feel comfortable sitting Jamar Chase. He's still a wide receiver 2 in the projections, but just as far as DFS goes, I would be wary of paying up for Jamar Chase. I assume he's not super cheap yet. There's too much upside there to ignore. So just a little caution about that. Then moving on to Courtland Sutton here, I have 3 spots ahead of ECR. That I don't know. There's going to be questions with Tyreek Hill depending on the wide receivers. So for Miami, I am pretty much projecting as if Teddy Bridgewater is going to be the quarterback there. And also just a heads up, there are going to be, I think there's about 3 names that are still questionable for this week that I did not rank, like Rashad Bateman, for example. So Courtland Sutton made it up here due to the matchup a little bit there. And just, I think, a little bit of influence maybe on the projections, as well as they're not being smash plays at wide receiver once we get to around this point. Things start to get questionable already here after the top 4. Do love those top 4, of course. Then moving on to the next 12, the wide receiver 2s, I have Chris Godwin in at 13, Jalen Waddle, Tyler Lockett, Mike Williams, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Amari Cooper, Chris Olave, Jacoby Myers, Devontae Smith. Let's start off with Chris Godwin. There's too much upside in this matchup that for me to ignore. So I would want to be starting up my Chris Godwin this week. That's the major thing here. So we'll see if he remains this high after I look at things further throughout the week. And just a heads up, you can find my updated rankings up on the website, www.theffforge.com. Link is down in the description. I will post those on Thursday, but really and truly by Saturday night or Sunday morning is when the final rankings will be coming in. Usually there's a couple tweaks yet on Sunday mornings, just dependent upon some of the last second guys that are a go or not. Then Mike Williams, I have 4 spots below the ECR. By the way, Chris Godwin was 7 spots ahead of ECR. Understandable, but either way, he's a start. As far as Mike Williams goes, I just dropped him below a few guys that the projections liked is really all it came to, and maybe only one. I think I had him at 15 prior to this, so he was still going to be making this list. Denver is a tough matchup, and they are a team that could scheme to really limit Mike Williams' effectiveness in this game. So I'm a little weary about it. As long as Keenan Allen is out, he's pretty much a must-start regardless of the matchup anyways, so what are you going to do? Then Michael Pittman have down 3 spots below ECR, and it comes down to the matchup. I think a little bit of my rankings might have influenced a spot or two there, but my projections might have influenced a spot or two this morning. I don't quite recall, but I'm a Michael Pittman owner, and I'm hesitant about him, and I am very much thinking about starting Christian Kirk over him as my wide receiver too. So this is a tough decision. I think my projections liked Christian Kirk more, I think. Then on to Jakobi Meyers. My projections loved. I don't go by the rankings, not what I say. I'm not someone who's ever had Jakobi Meyers on my team, and he's outperformed the wide receivers on my team plenty of weeks. So there is a lot of upside there. Jakobi Meyers is looking great. He's definitely worked himself into essentially must-start territory. So now let's get on to... Oh, come on. Move on to the wide receiver threes, starting at 25 with Allen Lazard, and we'll just stop right there. So I have Allen 3 spots up ahead of ECR. This just, once again, comes down to several guys not performing like we expected. Devin Duvernay is one name that I want to put up even higher, but especially without knowing about Rashad Bateman, we don't know. But there seems to be less risk with Devin Duvernay having an absolute bust than some of these guys, and that's sort of where Allen Lazard falls into. Is there's not a heck of a lot of risk here in this matchup against the New York Jets, so I definitely like Allen Lazard this week. Then we got some questionable names here with Deontay Johnson, Drake London, some iffy situations going on there for them. And then Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, I have both of them behind the ECR. Terry McLaurin by 6 spots, Curtis Samuel by 3. You'll see that is the line that I went to, was 3 spots behind ECR as far as the guys that we're talking about. My projections have Curtis Samuel up ahead of Terry McLaurin. Of course, my projections are based on previous production. So for both of the defense is everything, but there's just, we know the upside of Terry McLaurin. It's too nice to ignore. So I think what my ultimate advice here would be for Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel. I've even had someone who owns them both ask me a question about including both of them in a start-sit question. So if you were to be in that situation, Terry McLaurin is your non-PPR guy and Curtis Samuel is your full PPR guy. Half PPR, it depends what you're looking for. Are you looking for a ceiling? Then go Terry McLaurin. If you're looking for a safe floor, then you go Curtis Samuel. As far as number 31 here, Brandon Ayuk. We'll just go through the second half of the wide receiver threes. Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, Devin Duvernay, George Pickens, Juju Smith-Schuster, DJ Moore. Brandon Ayuk, I have 4 spots ahead of ECR going up against Atlanta. I really like him this week, and I should have met. Debo's a guy who I'm looking to maybe move a little bit further back in my projections, just looking forward. He may not have that rushing work that he had early on in the season so much, and there were reasons that I thought he may not have that for the entirety of the season, but, in part, mix it in, but nothing like last season. And so if that turns out to be true, I would think it'll pick up near the end of the year if they're in playoff contention. Then Debo's going to be falling down in the rankings, just in general, on a week in and week out basis. But we're at that tipping point right now of seeing. We need to see something from Debo quickly. I like Brandon Ayuk this week. Good matchup. Tough to sit him in a flex option situation. Then Devin Duvernay, same thing. Tough to sit him in a flex option type of situation. You may even want to put him in there as a wide receiver too. May want to. I don't know how Devin Duvernay owners feel about him, but he's been good so far. And if Rashad Bateman's out again, based on last week, you gotta like some of the opportunities, and just based on other people that you may have on your roster, you may just want that upside and trustworthiness more than some other guys. Then Juju Smith-Schuster going up against Buffalo. I have him at 35. The ECR on him is 32. I would like to move him back even more. Yeah, he's a little bit of a tough one to trust right now, and it sucks because this is one of those matchups where it's appealing because there is this like super high ceiling, but it's scary because the Buffalo defense is good. Kansas City is one of those offenses that can offset the Buffalo good defense, and especially with the state of that defense, depending on how many players they do or do not get back this week, it's not what it once was. It's not at full strength, I should say. Then moving on to our wide receiver fours, Tyler Boyd, Rondale Moore, Romeo Doubs, Corey Davis, Darnell Mooney, Garrett Wilson, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Michael Gallup, Elijah Moore, Alec Pierce, Zay Jones, and Joshua Palmer. As we get towards the end here, there will be some more shifting around of guys. I just need to think on them more because we're starting, my projections are based on previous production. So we start to really get into an area with guys like Alec Pierce where it's 2/3 of that data set is probably not accurate going forward. So he is a name that I will want to move forward. It just comes down to figuring out how much forward I can or cannot move him. Rondale Moore is going to be one that I actually felt comfortable enough just jumping some spots, and I think the projections might have supported that to some extent. I have him 5 spots ahead of ECR at 38, ECR being 43. Going up against Seattle, I like the matchup. It's not a necessarily great matchup for wide receivers, but I think all in all, there's a lot of upside there, especially with how Seattle's been playing games as of all season and as of late as well. Then Romeo Doubs, I have 5 spots behind ECR at 39, going up against the Jets. It's a good matchup. He's a fine flex. I have no issues with him this week, and definitely could be a bit of a get-right week for the Green Bay offense. I know there is some concern. I don't think a team has ever won their next game after playing in London, or is it playing overseas? I don't know the specific stat on that, but I did hear that last week. So is there some sort of travel hangover and getting back into the groove of things that Green Bay could be in trouble this week? Maybe. Then Corey Davis, I have 4 spots up ahead of ECR at 40. ECR is 44 on him, going up against Green Bay, a matchup that I did not think I could say would be somewhat favorable, but it hasn't been that bad for wide receivers. I do think it is slightly, as you can see, it is slightly on the negative side there compared to other matchups, but it's nothing frightening. Production might be down a tiny bit. And I don't think that really matters for these New York Jets receivers because either this first week has been a bit of a mirage, which I've spoke about in one of my other videos this week, that I'm not sold that these wide receivers' value is actually going to be season-long crushed by Zach Wilson. There have been some factors at play that just have, by design, made the wide receivers less important for Zach Wilson to get the ball into their hands over this first week and so. So I still do not hate these New York Jets wide receivers. I think they are in a hold situation, and Corey Davis is my favorite of the 3. So I do think in especially a non-PPR type league, he is viable. Then Garrett Wilson, ECR on him is 33. I have him at 42. I have some concerns on him. My rankings and my projections are, they're in between the first 3 weeks of data and the last 2 weeks of data for him. So I don't know how trustworthy those are. They did have him neck and neck with Corey Davis, which means Corey Davis has moved up a lot as far as projections go over the last couple of weeks. So I expect that to continue to be different. But I don't hate Garrett Wilson this week. You should have better options, more trustworthy options. Then Elijah Moore, I also have behind ECR, 4 spots behind. I have at 45, ECR is 41 on him, and I'm the same story. So I thought Elijah Moore would be the boomer bust wide receiver of this group with that high upside that you could not ignore. Garrett Wilson would just lose out to lower ADOT and not enough targets, and Corey Davis would be the trustworthy 9-ish targets a game with a few bigger targets mixed in there, and maybe the most touchdowns, I guess, out of the 3 season long. So that's where I lay on them, and I guess I just have them all a little bit behind ECR. And then let's finish this up with our wide receiver 5s for those deeper leagues. Russell Gage, Allen Robinson, Marvin Jones, Chase Claypool, Robbie Anderson, Randall Cobb, KJ Osborne, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Devontae Parker, Richie James Jr., Mecole Hardman, Noah Brown. As you can see, I didn't really have much of an argument to bring these guys up. Randall Cobb's obviously pretty interesting this week for a safe floor kind of guy. Donovan Peoples-Jones is not someone that I would want to be trusting this week. Marvin Jones is a guy where he may be fine in the rankings, but there's always going to be more upside with other guys. So, and higher floors as well for a floor play. He's just kind of one of those, like an AJ Green last year, where every week he does okay, he does fine, but that's kind of his place, I believe, in the fantasy landscape. Allen Robinson's going to be enticing once again, but obviously you just can't trust that. And Richie James Jr., I should say, too, and just in general, those New York Giants wide receivers, maybe a little bit enticing, especially for a DFS type play this week going up against Baltimore. I think that is where we will end it. Mecole Hardman's a definite like DFS type guy probably, if his price isn't very high. Yeah, that's it for the wide receivers. Take care. I love you, and I'll be back with the running back video shortly after this. I'm gonna film it right away and then edit these and load them up to the YouTubes. Bye.